Most people spend their entire gardening life on a treadmill. They buy seeds every February, plant in May, water all summer, and by October it's gone. They do the same thing next year. And the year after, forever, trapped in a cycle that costs them money, time, and energy every single season. But here's what the old-timers knew that the modern gardeners have completely forgotten. Some crops once planted never stop giving. They come back harder every year. They spread without you asking. They survive drought, neglect, hard winters, and bad soil. And they produce real calorie-dense, nutrient-rich food while you're off doing something else. These aren't exotic plants from some faraway climate. These are low-maintenance, high-output crops that work in most of North America. Growing zones 3 through 8, and once they're in the ground, the hardest part is over. If you've been planting the same tomatoes and squash every spring like it's a sport, this video is going to change how you think about your garden permanently, because the real power move isn't working harder. It's working once and eating forever. Hit subscribe right now because this channel is about building food systems that last, not scrambling for seeds every spring while prices go up and supply gets uncertain. These 10 crops will feed you with almost zero effort. Let's start with number 10. Number 10. Sweet potato, the lazy gardener's most productive crop. Most people think of sweet potatoes as a garden project, something you need perfect warm soil, perfect timing, and perfect conditions to grow. That's wrong. Sweet potatoes are one of the most forgiving high-calorie crops you can plant. And once you understand how to work with them instead of against them, they become almost effortless. Here's what makes them permanent infrastructure. Sweet potatoes propagate from slips, small sprouts that grow off a stored tuber. That means once you grow your first crop, you never buy plants again. You save a few tubers, sprout your own slips in late winter, and plant in spring, year after year. No seed company, no nursery, no cost. One sweet potato vine planted in a 4-foot square will sprawl across your entire bed, smothering weeds as it goes, and produce 5 to 10 pounds of dense, calorie-rich tubers by fall. They're loaded with vitamin A, vitamin C, potassium, and complex carbohydrates, exactly the nutrition your body needs when variety is limited. Here's why they're on this list. Sweet potatoes thrive in poor sandy soil that most vegetables refuse to grow in. They don't need fertilizer. Heavy nitrogen actually makes them produce too many leaves and not enough tubers. They want sun, warmth, and to be left alone. That's it. Once the vines take over, you don't water, you don't weed, you barely look at them. Planting is simple. Start slips indoors 6 weeks before your last frost. Once nights stay above 50 degrees Fahrenheit, transplant slips into raised mounds 12 inches apart. Mulch around the base and let them run. In October, after a light frost blackens the leaves, dig carefully and you'll find your harvest waiting underground. Storage is where sweet potatoes shine. Cure them at 80 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit for 10 days after harvest. Then store in a cool, dark place. They last 6 to 12 months without refrigeration. One season's work feeds you through an entire year. That's the deal. Why it's on the list. Sweet potatoes give you maximum calories with minimum labor. They improve your soil, eliminate weeds, propagate themselves, and store for almost a year. If you're only going to add one staple crop to your garden this year, this is it. Number 9. Mint, the unstoppable herb that works while you sleep. You've probably heard that mint spreads aggressively and takes over your garden. That's not a warning, that's the feature. Once you plant mint in the right spot, it becomes a permanent self-managing ground cover that produces edible, medicinal, deeply useful leaves every single season without you touching it. Here's what most people miss about mint. It's not just a garnish for tea. Peppermint and spearmint contain compounds menthol, rosmarinic acid, menthone that have been used medicinally for centuries. They're antifungal, antimicrobial, digestive, and analgesic. In a world where you're working hard outdoors, eating heavy stored food, and dealing with stress, fresh mint becomes practical medicine, not decoration. Mint is cold-hardy to zone 3. It dies back completely in winter and returns stronger every spring. You don't replant it. You don't divide it unless you want to spread it further. You just let it do what it does, then harvest as needed. The more you cut it, the more it produces. It thrives in partial shade, which means you can plant it under trees, along fences, in the corners of your property that nothing else wants to grow in. Planting is straightforward. Buy one small plant or get a cutting from a friend. Plant it in a spot where you want it to spread or contain it in a large buried container if you need to control it. Water it through the first season. After that, it handles itself. Harvest by cutting stems a few inches above the ground. Within weeks, it's back and bushier than before. Dry it for tea. Use it fresh in meals or steep it in hot water to treat headaches, stomach aches, and nausea. One plant eventually becomes dozens. Dozens become a permanent harvest. Why it's on the list. Mint requires one planting, zero maintenance, and provides both nutrition and natural medicine indefinitely. In a garden designed for low effort and high return, it earns its place every single year. Number 8. Multiplier onions. The onion that divides and multiplies every year. Regular onions are an annual project. You plant sets in spring, harvest in summer, and start over next year. Multiplier onions, also called potato onions or Dutch shallots, work completely differently. You plant one bulb, and by harvest time, it is divided into a cluster of 6 to 12 new bulbs. You eat half and replant half. Every year. Forever. This is one of the oldest forms of food security in human history. Before seed catalogs existed, families kept multiplier onions going for generations, saving and replanting year after year without spending a cent. The system is completely self-sustaining once it's started. Here's the practical advantage. Onions are in almost every recipe ever created. They provide flavor, vitamins B6 and C, quercetin, a powerful anti-inflammatory antioxidant, and sulfur compounds that support immune function. When your diet narrows and food gets monotonous, onions are what make everything edible. They are the single most used flavoring vegetable in the world, and multiplier onions give you a permanent zero-cost supply. Multiplier onions are cold hardy to zone 3. They tolerate poor soil and drought once established. They can be planted in fall for spring harvest or in early spring. They don't need rich soil, in fact. Too much nitrogen makes them grow lots of tops and small bulbs. Plant in full sun, in well-drained soil, and leave them alone. Planting is simple. Place bulbs 4 inches deep, 6 inches apart, with the pointed end up. Mulch lightly over winter if planting in fall. In spring, watch the clusters emerge and expand. By early summer, when the tops start to fall over, they're ready. Dig the cluster. Cure them in a dry, shaded spot for 2 weeks, then separate and store. Keep back your smallest bulbs for replanting. Those small ones divide most aggressively. Eat the big ones. Within 3 seasons, you'll have more onions than you can use, and you'll never buy a set again. Why it's on the list. Multiplier onions are entirely self-sufficient after the first planting. They propagate themselves, they last in storage for months, and they provide one of the most essential flavors and nutritional compounds in any functional kitchen. Number 7. Lovage, the forgotten perennial that tastes like celery and grows like a weed. If you've never grown lovage, you're missing one of the easiest, most productive perennial herbs in existence. Lovage is a hardy European perennial that grows 4 to 6 feet tall, comes back every year from the same rootstock, and tastes exactly like celery, but stronger, richer, and more intense. Every part of it is edible. Here's the problem lovage solves. Celery is one of the most difficult, finicky vegetables to grow from scratch. It wants perfect moisture, rich soil, cool temperatures, and a long growing season. Most home gardeners fail at it entirely. Lovage gives you that same deep, savory flavor with zero effort. You plant it once, in a corner of your garden, and it comes back every spring bigger than the year before. The leaves go into soups, stews, salads, and sauces. The hollow stems can be used as drinking straws or flavor stirrers. The seeds, which form in late summer, are a powerful culinary spice similar to celery seed, used in breads, pickling, and seasoning. One plant gives you 3 usable products from spring through fall. Lovage is cold hardy to zone 3. It tolerates poor soil, partial shade, and neglect. It's drought tolerant once established. The only thing it wants is reasonable drainage and full to partial sun. Plant it once in a spot where a tall plant is welcome, along a fence, at the back of a bed, beside a shed, and it will grow there permanently. Planting is easy. Start from seed indoors 6 weeks before last frost, or buy transplants. Set them 24 inches apart in their permanent spot. Water through the first season. By year 2, your plant will be large and productive. In fall, cut it back to the ground. Mulch over the crown. In spring, it returns. Propagation is by division. Every 4 to 5 years, dig up the crown in early spring, divide it into sections, and replant. One plant becomes 4. You can share with neighbors, plant at multiple locations, or just let it grow larger. Why it's on the list. Lovage is entirely self-sustaining, provides a rare and deeply useful flavor that most perennial gardens lack, and once established, it's essentially indestructible. In a garden where every square foot should produce maximum value, lovage earns its space every single year. Number 6. Strawberries. The fruit that spreads, multiplies, and feeds you automatically. Here's a fruit most people already love but almost nobody grows correctly. Strawberries are perennial. They spread by runners. They multiply on their own every single year and produce more fruit the older and more established they get. A properly managed strawberry bed is a permanent food system that requires almost no work after the first year. The nutritional value is serious. Strawberries are packed with vitamin C. 1 cup delivers over 100% of your daily requirement, along with folate, potassium, and some of the highest antioxidant concentrations of any common fruit. They're anti-inflammatory, heart-supporting, and blood sugar regulating. And they're one of the most calorie-efficient fruits to grow in a small space. Here's what most people get wrong. They treat strawberries like annuals, buying new plants every spring and wondering why they get such small harvests. The secret is the runner system. Every year your plants send out long horizontal stems called runners. Those runners root and form new daughter plants. If you let your bed fill in and train the runners strategically, within 3 years you'll have a dense, highly productive patch covering ground you didn't have to work. June-bearing varieties produce a single massive harvest in early summer, ideal for preserving, fermenting, or drying. Ever-bearing varieties produce smaller but continuous harvests from spring through fall, ideal if you want fresh fruit all season. Plant bare root crowns in early spring. Set them 12 to 18 inches apart in full sun. With the crown at soil level, not buried, not too shallow. Mulch with straw between plants. Water regularly the first season. After that, the bed largely takes care of itself. Renovate annually by mowing or cutting back after fruiting, thinning overcrowded plants, and directing runners where you want new growth. Why it's on the list. Strawberries spread without your help, produce valuable nutrition, and once established, an 8-foot bed will feed a family fresh fruit every season with almost zero ongoing effort. They're the easiest perennial fruit crop for any size garden. Number 5. Horseradish. The indestructible root that grows itself back every year. Most people think of horseradish as something you buy in a jar at the grocery store. It's time to change that. Horseradish is a deeply hardy, almost impossible to kill perennial root crop that once planted, regrows every single year from even the smallest piece of root left in the ground. You will never need to buy horseradish again after your first planting. Here's why it earns its place. Horseradish root is loaded with glucosinolates, the same compounds found in broccoli and mustard that have powerful antimicrobial, antibacterial, and anti-inflammatory properties. Before antibiotics, horseradish was used medicinally across Europe and North America to treat respiratory infections, urinary tract infections, and sinus congestion. Fresh grated horseradish is one of the most potent natural antimicrobials you can grow. The flavor profile transforms everything. Mixed with vinegar and salt, it becomes a condiment that cuts through fatty meats, heavy stews, and preserved foods. In a diet heavy on stored and preserved food, that sharp, clean intensity wakes up your palate and your digestion. Horseradish is cold hardy to zone 2. It tolerates poor soil, clay, drought, and total neglect. It spreads by horizontal root growth and is nearly impossible to eradicate once established, which is exactly what you want from a permanent food crop. Planting is effortless. Buy root cuttings called sets in spring. Plant them at a 45-degree angle, 4 inches deep, 18 inches apart, in full sun or partial shade. Mulch lightly. Water occasionally the first season, then step back. By fall, you'll have harvestable roots 10 to 18 inches long. To harvest, dig in fall after the first frost, which concentrates the flavor. Pull the main root and grate fresh. Replant small side roots for next year's crop. 1 pound of root planted becomes 5 to 10 pounds harvested. Why it's on the list. Horseradish is completely self-sustaining, provides both food and functional medicine, and thrives in conditions that most crops won't tolerate. Once it's in the ground, it's there for life, producing every year with zero input from you. Number 4. Sorrel, the perennial green nobody grows that comes back every year before anything else. Garden sorrel is the most undervalued leafy vegetable most home gardeners have never tried. It's a perennial green that overwinters as a root. emerges in very early spring often while snow is still on the ground, and produces tender lemony, vitamin-rich leaves for months before it goes dormant in summer heat. Then in fall it comes back for a second harvest. This timing is critical. In early spring, when your garden is bare and your body has been living on stored food all winter, sorrel is already producing. Nothing else is. Not spinach, not kale, not lettuce. Sorrel is already there, giving you fresh greens loaded with vitamin C, vitamin A, and oxalic acid, the same compound that gives it that sharp, bright lemon flavor. Use the young leaves raw in salads, where the citrusy bite wakes up even the simplest ingredients. Cook them into soups, sauces, and egg dishes. Sorrel melts into a bright green sauce that pairs with fish, chicken, or vegetables. It's a flavoring, a green, and a vitamin source, all in one compact plant. Sorrel is cold-hardy to zone 3. Once established, the deep taproot stores energy through winter and pushes new growth in early spring with zero help from you. It tolerates partial shade and poor soil. It doesn't need fertilizer. In rich soil, the flavor becomes milder. In lean, slightly acidic soil, it's at its best. Planting is simple. Start from seed indoors 4 weeks before last frost, or direct sow in early spring. Space plants 12 inches apart in full sun to partial shade. Mulch around the base. Water through the first season. After that, it manages itself. To maintain production, cut flower stalks before they open once sorrel bolts. Leaves become more bitter and less productive. Cutting keeps it in leaf mode longer. Every 3 to 4 years, divide the crown in early spring to reinvigorate the plant and expand your patch. Why it's on the list. Sorrel gives you fresh greens earlier in the season than anything else in your garden. It requires 1 planting, 0 fertilizer, and comes back harder every year. In a garden designed around low effort and high nutrition, it fills a gap nothing else can. Number 3. Turkish Rocket. The perennial mustard green that self-seeds and never disappears. Turkish Rocket, Bunyas orientalis, is a perennial mustard relative from Eastern Europe that almost no one in North America grows, and that is a serious mistake. Once you plant it, it self-seeds freely, meaning even if the original plant dies, its offspring are already in the ground. It is, for practical purposes, a permanent crop that never has to be replanted. Here's what makes it exceptional. Turkish Rocket is one of the most cold-hardy leafy greens in existence, surviving down to zone 3 with no protection. It emerges in very early spring, producing large, coarse leaves that taste like a mild, slightly spicy mustard green. It keeps producing through summer without bolting, unlike annual mustard, which goes to seed the moment it gets warm. Then in fall, it produces a second flush of tender growth. The leaves are high in vitamin C, vitamin K, and glucosinolates, the anti-cancer compounds found throughout the mustard family. They can be eaten raw when young and tender, or cooked into stir-fries, soups, and mixed greens dishes when mature. The flavor is bold but not harsh, bright and peppery, with a slight bitterness that pairs well with fat, acid, and salt. The plant grows 2 to 3 feet tall and wide. In its second and third years, it produces clusters of small yellow flowers that are also edible. Use them like broccoli florets before they open. After flowering, it sets hundreds of seeds. Some seeds you harvest for planting or eating. The rest fall to the ground and germinate on their own, creating a self-sustaining colony. Plant seeds directly in fall for spring germination, or start indoors and transplant. Space 18 inches apart in full sun to partial shade. Soil quality doesn't matter. Turkish Rocket thrives in clay, gravel, or depleted ground. Water through the first season. After that, it's on its own. Why it's on the list. Turkish Rocket is one of the few true perennial vegetables that self-seeds so aggressively it becomes essentially permanent in your garden. It produces fresh greens in 2 seasons per year, thrives in terrible conditions, and once established, requires nothing from you. That's exactly what a high-value, low-effort garden needs. Number 2. Ground cherries. The self-seeding fruit machine. You never have to replant. Ground cherries, Physalis pruinosa, are technically an annual in cold climates, but they behave like perennials because they self-seed so prolifically that you will never have to plant them again after the first year. Every fall, hundreds of seeds drop into your soil. Every spring, dozens of new plants emerge on their own. You don't start seeds. You don't buy transplants. You just let them do what they do and harvest the fruit. This is the self-perpetuating crop most people overlook entirely because they've never tried one. Ground cherries produce small, papery husked fruits like tiny tomatillos that taste like a combination of pineapple, vanilla, and tomato. They're sweet, complex, and completely unlike anything else in the garden. Kids love them. Adults can't stop eating them off the plant. The nutritional profile is strong. Ground cherries contain withanolides, naturally occurring compounds also found in ashwagandha, that have anti-inflammatory and immune-modulating properties. They're also good sources of vitamin C, vitamin A, niacin, and phosphorus. And because they store in their husks at room temperature for up to 3 months, they extend your fresh food window well into winter. A single plant produces hundreds of fruits per season. 3 plants produce more than most families can eat. The husked fruits can be eaten fresh, dried like raisins made into jam, or used in baked goods. Dried ground cherries have a concentrated sweetness similar to raisins and store for over a year. The plants grow 2 to 3 feet wide and tall, sprawling across the ground. They tolerate poor soil, heat, and moderate drought. They need full sun and good drainage. Beyond that, they ask for nothing. Plant once in a sunny, well-drained spot. Space 24 inches apart. Let them fruit and drop seeds in fall. The following spring, thin the volunteers and let the strongest ones grow. You now have a permanent crop that manages its own propagation. Why it's number 2. Ground cherries are the most genuinely effortless fruit-producing crop in this list. After year 1, they exist entirely on their own. No planting, no starting seeds, no nursery trips. Just show up in summer and harvest. Number 1. Walking onions. The crop that literally plants itself forever. This is the one. If you only add a single crop from this entire list, make it this one. Egyptian walking onions, also called tree onions or top-setting onions, are a perennial allium unlike anything else in the plant kingdom. They grow like regular scallions, producing edible green tops you can harvest constantly all season. But at the top of each stalk, instead of a flower, the plant grows a cluster of small bulblets. Those bulblets get heavy. The stalk bends over. The bulblets touch the soil. They root, and a new plant grows. The onion literally walks across your garden and plants itself. That's not a metaphor. That is exactly what happens. Once you understand that, you realize what you actually have. A self-propagating, self-expanding, fully edible food system that requires zero input from you after the initial planting. No seeds, no sets, no dividing, no replanting. The crop manages its own reproduction and expands its own territory, season after season, year after year. Here's the survival level advantage. Alliums, onions, garlic, chives are the backbone of flavor in virtually every cuisine on earth. They also provide quercetin, sulfur compounds, and allicin, which have some of the strongest antimicrobial and immune-supporting properties of any common vegetable. These are compounds your body actively needs, especially under physical stress, poor diet variety, or illness. Walking onions give you 2 distinct harvests. The green tops are edible from very early spring through late falls. Snip them with scissors and they regrow within weeks, exactly like chives. The small bulblets at the top of the stalks, harvested in late summer when they're firm and marble-sized, taste like concentrated shallots. Use them fresh, pickle them whole, or replant them to expand your patch even faster. They're cold-hardy to zone 3. They grow in poor soil, tolerate partial shade, handle drought, and shrug off freezing temperatures. They're essentially indestructible. In 10 years of growing, most gardeners report never losing a single plant to weather. Planting is straightforward. Source bulblets from a fellow gardener or a specialty nursery. They're increasingly available online. Plant them 1 inch deep and 6 inches apart in fall or early spring in full sun or partial shade. Water occasionally through the first season. Then watch the system start to run itself. By year 2, your original plants are producing bulblets. Those bulblets are walking. By year 3, you have a spreading colony that's more than you need. You eat some bulblets, leave some to walk, and give some away. The patch grows every year without any action from you. Harvest greens by snipping, never pull, as that disrupts the root system. Harvest bulblets in late summer by pinching them off the stalk when firm. Eat fresh or dry them in a mesh bag in a cool, dark place for months of storage. Here's the closing truth. Every crop on this list requires some work at the beginning. Planting, establishing, learning the harvest cycle. But walking onions are the one crop where even the propagation is automated. The plant does the work. You just show up for the harvest. That's the whole point of this list. You build a system once. The system feeds you forever. 10 crops, One planting cycle, decades of food. Most people garden like it's a hobby, buying seeds every year, starting over every spring, depending on supply chains that might not always be there. But the gardeners who eat consistently, effortlessly, and abundantly are the ones who build permanent systems, not annual projects, systems. These 10 crops can cover flavor, calories, nutrition, medicine, and fresh produce across all 4 seasons. Some need 2 or 3 years to fully establish. That means the best time to plant was 3 years ago. The second best time is right now. While you can still source tubers, crowns, divisions, and bulblets easily and cheaply, start building these systems, because once they're established, your garden runs itself and you spend your energy harvesting instead of constantly replanting. What crop are you starting with? Drop it in the comments. And if you want more content about building permanent low-effort food systems, subscribe now, because this is exactly what this channel is built around.